Alright, I'm gonna need my glasses for this. This is my new occupational glasses. Anyway, people have been asking me what's the update on what happened when my father died, and I really wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about it. I don't think I was ready to talk about it, and really I don't even want this video to be really concentrate so much on that, but I just felt like I'm ready to talk about it. I already took my pictures because I don't want to start crying, but it took me a long time to grieve my father, and it took me, and I still felt like I was feeling nothing, you know. I guess because my father and I had not had a relationship for 7 years, and you know, I had gotten over it, you know. I got gotten over that, and I was feeling nothing, you know, and I was like, what the heck is wrong with me? It took me a long time to grieve him, but there was a reason why it took me so long. And just recently, my mom sent me a box, and I finally felt something, and I guess I'm feeling like, you know, now I guess it's the right time. I was waiting for the right time, a time where I didn't have appointments to rush to, you know, and I could be, you know, I guess really think about what I'm going to say, I guess, and I'm going to explain why it took me so long to grieve him, but I don't want it to be about that really. This is just about, I guess I wanted just to lead into I finally was able to grieve my dad. But you know, when you saw it, this has been almost a year and a half ago when you saw my videos about all the stuff I was going through, all the emotions I was going through because of pressure that I was put on with my family, because of stuff that certain people in my family did, you know, because of the drama that it caused, because, you know, I thought that nobody watched my videos. I thought it was just me talking to my friends. I thought it was just me venting. And, you know, I had things to learn as well, you know, about all of this. But, you know, I remember one of the things I did to help me get through the initial process when he first died, or when I first knew that he was dying or going through that process, I would listen to the songs Hillsongs, Oceans by Hillsongs. It is a Christian song, but it's a beautiful song about, I guess, my father in heaven. And it helped me to grieve my earthly father. Every time I felt like I was going through the grieving process, something would always happen to make me angry. The initial thing that I guess made me angry was who he left in charge of the estate. So if you saw the original videos, you heard about it, and at first I didn't want to have anything to do with any of that. I didn't really want to care. But one of the first things that I found out was that he had asked me to be spied on. And that's why my video was seen and was sent to my family and caused all this drama. You know, of course that got me upset. At first I was like, whatever, you know, I'm not going to, the state probably has nothing to do with me, you know, I don't want to have nothing to do with it. And then I found out that legally I am a part of it, and so now I have to deal with it. When you have siblings, when you have an estate, and you have, or when your parents die and your parents have an estate, by law, legally, the siblings have a part in that. So now I'm going to have to deal with it. It got really ugly. It just got really ugly. And every time something got ugly, I would be mad at my father all over again. Every time I would feel like I was grieving him. You know, again, I just want to like go over it fact by fact. I really get into too many details. I just want to get through this. You know, one of the issues was, again, what's the law? How is the funeral going to be paid for? That became an issue. Some iffy little paperwork came about So instead of paying for it the way it should have been paid for, it came um, out of the insurance money, which really that's not the way it's supposed to be. But that became an issue. Then it became an issue basically, I think the worst of it was, it is very unethical for any type of legal person to try and tell you what to do and involve third parties into things. And basically what that came down to was trying to make us choose between our mother and our youngest sister. I think that was the worst part of it. And I mean, this is the kind of crap that was being pulled. How the funeral was going to be paid, trying to involve things that didn't need to get involved, trying to make us choose between our mother and our baby sister. And I think that for me, probably the second worst part of it was that time that I told you about last June, that it was like one of the worst times of my life, of the stress of having to deal with so many things at once, with my son taking his GED test, my daughter being in this faraway group of some sort of class that she was taking, work group or something, and then I was trying to deal with the taxes, and then I as I stated before, pressure or harassment from the estate, trying to work with the estate to sign some sort of legal document, and yet nothing I did would, it had to be done their way, and it was like, it just came down to harassment, and that harassment came at one of the worst times of my life, and then I finally got it done, and yet just got, again, ugliness happened, and I was insulted very immaturely. I mean, they even refused to call me by my name. All my siblings were called by their name, but I was called by my YouTube channel name. I mean, it was very petty, very immature. So every time, in the space that it took between the three issues I just mentioned that happened over the course of a few months, in between those times, I'm starting to grieve my father, and then another issue would arise. Then I was starting to grieve my father, and then another issue would arise. And every time an issue would arise with the estate, I would get mad at my father all over again. What the heck was he thinking? Why did he put them in charge? He should have put a neutral party in charge. It would have went so much more smoother. And so every time I would feel that I'm finally starting to grieve my father, something would happen. And then, me, you insult me, I'm going to say how it is. And the thing is, that insult at that point that happened last June, I held back a lot. I tried, every time I tried to deal with it, I tried to deal with it in a matter-of-fact way, as opposed to being insulting. I held back, because I could have said some really insulting stuff, some truths that maybe people are blind to. But, I actually could have been downright mean. I was trying to be very matter-of-fact and civil, if you could call it that, but never insulting. And I could have said some pretty mean things. And every time something came up, it was, usually done by email. I always tried to do it without my youngest sister being involved in those emails. But always they would get to her, and basically, bottom line, the state was trying to, I guess, keep a wedge between us, or make my baby sister see my worst side. And basically, one of the things I found out during that process, and I've heard from a lot of people, that deaths in the family could either bring the family together or tear them up. It brings out the worst in people. And I could have made a decision and said, you know what, screw it. I don't need them. I don't need this. But then, of course, I've got my father in me, and I've got my Puerto Rican pride. If that's what the law says, then that's what it's gonna be, And I felt that it wasn't right to let the estate get away with something like that, and legally they couldn't anyway. So basically, it got to the point that I wasn't even receiving the statements, which I was supposed to, of the estate statements. And basically I'm thinking, well, it's going to be over 6 months, and then we don't ever have to deal with each other ever again. And 6 months came and excuses started coming up. And to me, it was like a thorn in the flesh. Like, I just didn't want to have to deal with the estate any longer than I had to. But, I mean, a couple of months could go by, and I was just glad I didn't have to deal with them. And, but, just again, I'm starting to grieve my father. I mean, I've got a busy life. So one of the things that keeps a lot of people from dealing with things is being busy. But just as I would start to feel the grieving process, again, something else would come up. So here, 6 months later, at least 3 things have come up. So here's an excuse. This is what, about 6 months later. It's, I don't know, maybe the same time as now, maybe this month. And so, again, something, this is gonna take quite a bit of time, and then another excuse will come up. And then over the holidays, of course, everyone can use some cash on the holidays. Again, got back to me that a very immature, very hypocritical, insulting thing was said. So again, just as I'm starting to feel that I was grieving him, again, then these things would come up. Stuff would get back to me, and it wasn't just me. Other members of my family have felt the brunt of pettiness and immaturity and vindictiveness. And so, you hear about that and it infuriates you. And, again, just always the same thing. What was my father thinking? Every time. But one of the things that also kind of got to me is, like, when you would see a meme or someone would say, who do you miss the most? My aunt, my grandmother, my dog. And I would never even think of my father. And I think that kind of bothered me. Like, why don't I feel it? And it's basically because we had no relationship for 7 years. I mean, I heard this saying that, rules without relationship will breed rebellion. And I guess, I know for me, I got to a point, as I had said in the video a year and a half ago, that my chains were broken. Of all the pain, of all the hurt, my chains were broken. I didn't want to go back to that. And I guess I did such a sufficient job of letting it go, just letting it go, that I guess, but it's like, it kind of bothered me that I just didn't feel. But every time I tried to grieve, something new would come up. So finally, like a whole year finally passes by. And basically it was a year to his death, which was about a week or two before my birthday. Finally, it was all finally the monies were sent out, but it was sent out at my birthday. It was sent out after my birthday. So when I think by law I was supposed to get the final statement or whatever. The excuses that were made as to why we didn't get the money 6 months earlier did not exist. The excuses that were said were there did not exist. Basically, from the little things I heard here and there, I'm pretty sure that, well, at least in my mind, I mean, it came after my birthday, that they just didn't want us to have the money in time for Christmas or for my birthday or whatever. And I could be wrong. This could just be what's in my head. But if you see the videos of what happened, what else am I gonna think? When petty vindictiveness and immature is involved, you're gonna think that oh well, they're just being petty, mature, and vindictive. So now that I knew that it was over. I didn't have to deal with them anymore. I didn't have to deal with the estate anymore. Everybody got their equal amounts. Now I knew it was over. I had my furniture. My sister was here for Christmas or for the holidays. She sunk. And my sofa had a huge hole in it. And she sunk right into that hole. I needed new furniture, so basically, it wasn't like an exorbitant amount, but I used it to get furniture, pay some bills, stuff like that. And so, we paid up all the bills. We got new furniture, and so that money was well spent, and I thank my father for that. That made me feel like he must have loved me. He could have changed his will. He could have kept me out of the insurance. He could have kept me out. I think legally I would have still had to, he still would have had to give me the part of the estate, but he could have kept me out of the will. I didn't have to receive insurance money or anything, which was used to pay for the funeral, which I heard is really the estate money is supposed to do that, but whatever. He could have kept me out of that. The insurance money went towards his funeral. He could have kept me out of that, but he didn't, and so to me, it's like now I can finally grieve my dad, and I can say, thank you, Dad, that I was able to buy new furniture. Thank you, Dad, that I was able to pay off some bills. If I finally got to a place when I knew I didn't have to deal with the estate anymore, and nothing was going to make me angry again, to make me angry at him for, what were you thinking? Why did you leave the estate like this? I was finally able to grieve him. And the song that I kept listening to was Piece by Piece by Kelly Clarkson. And I just allowed myself to feel it. And when you listen to Kelly Clarkson's songs about her father who had abandoned her, and one of the things I can tell you, it wasn't like that, I was able to sit down and really grieve my father. It lasted maybe a week or two. Again, I felt like it should have lasted longer. Again, what's wrong with me? It should have lasted longer. But for that week or two, I just let myself feel it. I just let myself feel his passing. My father, he may have done his stuff. Puerto Rican men are womenizers, especially back in the old day. It was like their divine right to cheat on their wives and commit adultery. He may have been a womanizer, but my father was a responsible man. My father took care of his children. He could have left us and went with one of his, other women, but he didn't do that. He could have left, them and say, those aren't my kids. But he didn't, He was responsible about all of his children. He loved all of his children. Whether he had favorites or not, I couldn't really tell you. Later on in years, when as adults, I saw things that, maybe he did, but as I had mentioned before, I was his firstborn live birth. The first child died in a stillbirth, and they planned for me, and you can see pictures of him holding me. He may never have changed a diaper or fed me. I don't think. My mom says that's just not the way it was in those days. He didn't do those things, but he loved me. Growing up, I was a daddy's girl. He didn't even want to hit me when I was a little girl, and one time he did. I don't know what happened. I was fighting with one of my cousins, and then he came to me and says, "Do you still love me? Do you still love me?" And I was able to remember the good things. I just remembered when he came home, how I would run into his arms and how much, we loved each other. So I just let myself grieve and remember, the good things. Well, another thing was how he took care of my grandmother. I know that can be a burden. Because when you get married, if you live with your husband's parents, they're going to be up your butt, And I know that must have been a burden to my mom. But what I saw out of that was, he's a good man. I think even biblically, you didn't put your parents in old folks' homes. You took care of your parents when they got too old to do it. And my father took care of my grandmother to the day that she died. He took care of her. He went above and beyond the duty of a son. And that's one of the things I loved about him. because I loved my grandmother so much. You know, growing up, when you go through that teenage years, oh, why she has to live with us? Why she goes watching me and telling me what to do? But once you become a parent, you just realize that your parents may not have been the most loving people, but at least my parents took care of me. You know, you hear about negligence, and my parents never neglected me. My parents always took care of me. My father always made sure we had that roof over our head and that food on the table. And he took care of his mother. I appreciate her so much, because when I look back, the person, if I didn't get the love that I felt I needed from my parents, I got it from my grandmother. She loved me to death. And just that, seeing that my father took care of her, you know, that's one of the things I admired so much about him. Another thing I admire about him is he instilled in me an appreciation of my heritage. You know, he's the one who told me that as Puerto Ricans, Boricuas, Puertorriqueños, and Puerto Ricans, our heritage is Native American. And I mean, there is a mixture. You know, they brought the slaves over, and they killed off through disease, killed off most of the Native Americans, disease and harsh treatment. So it's very little that we know about the Taino culture of the Native Americans of the Caribbean islands. But he made me appreciate, this is your heritage. And I still have that appreciation to this day. I love my Native American culture, you know. And I mean, you know, like I said, there's a mixture, because, you know, the Europeans, they were white, they brought over the black slaves. So there's always a mixture. My family, they've got blonde-haired, blue-eyed, green-eyed members in my family, you know. But he loved his Native American culture and passed that on to me. One of the things I think I got from him too is being a collector. I guess my father could border on the hoarder side, but I think that's where I got my collector instinct. And I could, you know, I used to collect Barbie dolls, I used to collect movies, and now, you know, I collect makeup, or Wet n Wild specifically more than anything. I got that from him, and that might not be the greatest thing, but it's, you know, part of him that's in me. You know, so, you know, my father, he you know, he used to say to me that, you know, I wouldn't forgive anyone, you know, I don't feel like I need to forgive anyone except my children, which made it harder for me to understand why, you know, he wouldn't talk to me for 7 years. But he loved us. I mean, when I went through my divorce, my divorce when I was married, I, you know, ran away from home at 16 because I couldn't take that authoritarian, you know, way of life, and I ran away from home, and I jumped into from the frying pan right into the fire, and it was horrible marriage. And I got divorced, and he was there for me. He was there for me throughout that time, and he was there for me. I mean, I think our issue started when I moved, you know, and I think he was angry at me for that. And I think that's when the issue started. But he was there for me. If I needed money, he would lend me money. I would always pay him back. And sometimes he would say, "Sure, no, you sure? You don't have to pay me back. You can pay me back another time." And I'm like, "No, you know, I learned from him. I don't like borrowing money from people because I don't know if I can pay them back. You know, so I don't ever want to get into that." So, you know, one of the things I had was at least being like him. He instilled in me responsibility, and you know, most times, every time I'll pay him back, but like there were a few times that he would say he would come back later and give it back to me as a gift. You know, I mean, that was my father. You know, so you know, I was able to finally grieve him. So, you know, the grieving process took about a week or two. And I don't know, it was just life's busyness. I just got over it. And I kind of felt like, how could I get over it so quickly, you know? What is wrong with me? And again, I just feel like we just didn't have that relationship, you know, and even that whole mess that happened online, I vent, and I just need to. One of the things I need to learn is that I vent, but people, I'm thinking nobody's gonna see it, and people might see it and be mad at you. And once I vent, I get over it, and then I could be cool with the person. But if the person sees it, they're gonna be mad at me because they heard, what I said. So I think that's something still that I'm learning. One of the things I learned through that process of what happened last year, but so again, I felt like, what was wrong with me, and I just kept telling myself, well, it was as if you didn't have a father. It was as if he died those 7 years ago when he refused to talk to me again. And then my mom, she sends me a package, and in that package was some Native American bandanas, and then this kerchief. And my son wears bandanas because his medication made him lose his hair. But I'm like, those bandanas, he might have hoarded, but this seems as though he used this at some point. I don't know. And then I smelled it, and I don't know. I don't remember what my father smells like, but it doesn't smell like my mom. So I'm going to assume his scent is on this. And then I finally felt something. And I told my son, you can keep the other Native American bandanas, but this is going to be mine. And I just hold it and I smell it. And I guess it takes me back to before those 7 years, to the relationship that I had with my dad. Growing up as a teenager, I know, like I said, rules without relationship will breed rebellion, and I was rebellious. But once I had my daughter, I realized, my parents may not have been perfect, but they did the best they could by me. And how he was there for me after my divorce, and before I got married, he was there for me. That's what this reminded me of. It reminded me of that. So I feel like I finally am grieved. I felt like I finally grieved him earlier this year, but now I feel even more like I finally feel something, And I was finally ready to talk about it. So, people have been asking me, and I really wasn't ready to talk about it. I didn't want to bring up the drama again. But I really felt like I should talk about my dad and the grieving process. And I felt that, this was the way to do it, to be, I like to be thorough. And, so I was just finally ready to talk about it. Another thing I got from my mom was these artistry. And I just remembered how me and my father, my brother, we used to talk about it, how much he loved this specific artist from back in my day. And it was really cool. I don't know, nobody else took it, I guess, when they were going through his stuff. It's like, I remember him saying this was like he loved this artist that he collected. He collected this. So just wanted to briefly show it to you because I'm gonna give it to my brother because I know he probably would appreciate it more than me. I just wanted to quickly just show you these beautiful artistry cards, man. Look at that. Just wanted to show you that real quick. So, okay. I'll see you next week. Be still on this theme of the new fall collection. And like I said, while said the holiday collection is coming up soon. And so I will see you next week, Lord willing, as long as no emergencies come up. Okay, I love you all.
working it with that purple hair.
You like it?
Yeah, I mean, you dye your hair all the time, but that one is like a great vibrant purple.